forget that Bruce knew that these films were made primarily for the Hong Kong fans of Hong Kong. And like allegedly they were prepping the Big Boss to be exported, and he was not happy about that. Enter the Dragon, you know, as that was technically a Concord co-production, a lot of the still missing footage from Enter the Dragon is stuff that Bruce was kind of shooting on his own.
So with all the outtakes we saw in the final Game of Death, which was phenomenal, James Flower, you guys, well done.
James was
you find it a little bit strange that there isn't this for the Bruce Lee other movies? You know, maybe not The Big Boss because it was the first one, but, you know, certainly Way of the Dragon. By then, he was a massive star in Hong Kong.
True.
And Enter the Dragon?
Yes.
I mean...
So I've had a theory about that. When it comes to Game of Death, since it was an incomplete film, I think Golden Harvest was basically just holding on to all the footage in the hopes that they could do different things with it over the years. Because, you know, you had Bruce Lee, the Man, the Legend, you had the 78 Game of Death, you had Bruce Lee, the Legend. So they just kept repurposing the footage over the years. So I feel like they held on to that because it was, even to this day, technically speaking, an incomplete film. Like, yes, we have the 78 film, which is like, it is a completed movie using footage from an incomplete film. Right. That is my way of looking at it. And so I think that's part of the reason why it was better preserved, even though for decades, you know, some of the footage was missing, which we thankfully found again. But that's the tricky thing, because for films that were completed, like The Big Boss, The Superior Way, The Dragon, they're like, why do we still have this? Enter the Dragon, on the other hand, that one seems to be a little trickier, because I think Warner Brothers archives might be a little different from some of the other films in that case, because I do think it's also possible, going back to what I mentioned earlier about how it was a Concord co-production, because a lot of times we'll say it was a Golden Harvest co-production, but you see in the opening credits, it's a Concord co-production, which is it's splitting hairs, because at the end of the day, it's Concord to Golden Harvest is kind of like Golden Way to Golden Harvest, or Boho to Golden Harvest, which they were like sub-production companies. You know, like Golden Way was Jackie Chan's, Boho was Sammo Hung's. And so, like, some of the stuff that he shot, especially on his own time, that could have been lingering at the Golden Harvest vaults at the Hong Kong Film Archive. The stuff that was shot, especially by Warner Brothers, could be in the Warner Brothers archive. And even when I was working on the Criterion version and looking at the materials list, there were implications of additional footage somewhere that was sort of like, oh no, you didn't read that. You didn't read that. It might have just been I wouldn't say misprint, but it was more like, I don't know, because here's the thing. I'm sure you've noticed this too, is in Warrior's Journey, in the documentary portion, there is an alternate take in Lee's room when O'Hara tells him, you know, that he must be, you know, in uniform for the morning ritual. And, you know, and he's pointing his finger at him, which we've seen the photo of, but it's an actual like film shot and in high quality, like it's from an original camera negative. And then he comes away, but he's got his back to the camera, and then he does the double punch. So it's like, all right, Warner Brothers is clearly screwing with us, because where's that footage from?
Exactly.
So it's like, and then when the 4Ks came out, just like we were talking about earlier, it's like, all right, cool. Maybe they'll finally dig up more of this footage. Oh, never mind. So it's just like, it seems like it's there, but in that case, it's just Warner Brothers, in my opinion, being a little cheap. So I think, unlike The Big Boss or the Fist of Fury teaser, there could be even more Enter the Dragon footage. But like, how many more physical video formats are there going to be at 4K?
Yeah, I know.
You know, it's like at this point, you're just going to keep re-releasing on 4K, and it's like, all right, well, we're already past the 50th anniversary. We're gonna have to wait till the 60th. I'm not going to be seeing an 8K version of Enter the Dragon. Like, once you're at 4K with 35 millimeter, you're not going to get much more on 8K. Like, to be fair, I've seen 4K restorations based on 8K scans, and you're going to be getting a little more detail. But I think like we're kind of reaching the end now.
To be honest, my eyes can't tell the difference, to be honest. You know, but they do look amazing. But it does bug me, that does. I mean, Warner Brothers as a company got a nice return on Enter the Dragon.
Absolutely. Over the last 50 years, absolutely. On every
a little bit of love. Give it a little bit of love. Send someone down there. I mean, apparently, so I was talking to Steve Kerridge about this. He saw Mel Gibson talking about one of the Lethal Weapons movies, and he was walking through the Warner Brother archives, and it is like a city of film reels. You know?
It's like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Exactly that. So
who's sitting on the Enter the Dragon footage? Top men. But who, really? Top men. So that's basically how it feels at this point.
Yeah. But like John Little said to me, it would be worth Warner Brothers paying someone minimum wage.
Yes.
To go looking. But who knows? Talking of Warrior's Journey, this is a question. What does Brandon think about using AI to complete the missing sections rather than the stand-ins in Warrior's Journey? And what are your thoughts on AI, audio and video anyway?
Oh boy, that is a slippery slope. And it's funny because I feel like a lot of us creative types, using that term loosely, makes me sound pretentious, like, oh, that's creative type. I feel like when it comes to AI, when it comes to enhancing things to an extent when there's no other options, whether it's audio, video, it can work to an extent. But I'm very much of the mind, like, if we can't get the original elements, don't bother. Because, for example, there was a recent release of a film on 4K in Germany, and I'm not going to like throw any companies under the bus right now, where, like, funny enough, there's another release of this film on 4K where this company had to say exclusive restoration because there are rumors that this film had an AI 4K restoration. And it was proven true. And I was like, yeah, no, because there's already been a lot of pushback with James Cameron with what he's been doing with Aliens, True Lies, Abyss, which, to be fair, I hate to say that that's the best release of True Lies right now, but when you realize that the last US release was a non-anamorphic DVD, like at the beginning of the DVD format, it's going to look better, one would hope. But I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like it works to an extent, like something like deepfake. Deepfake is more like manual and AI kind of together. So I feel like you're not putting someone out of a job at that point. AI to replicate someone's voice, that gets a little tricky too, because I remember with Alien Romulus, there was a little bit of pushback with, oh my God, I'm blanking on the actor's name. The actor who played Ash in the original Alien, Ian Holm, I think.
Yeah, I think it is.
Rip me apart now.
I can't remember.
The guy, Bilbo Baggins, the older Bilbo Baggins. But, you know, spoiler alert, they brought him back as Rook in Alien Romulus. And the reaction was hit or miss. So it was not AI in the traditional sense, but it was more like a half like manual puppeteering and then half deep fake. So they were still using like manual elements to make it come to life. But I think like full generative AI, I'm not the biggest fan of, because that's where you start to have people, you know, risking losing their jobs and things like that. So for something like Game of Death, I feel like if you're more on the deep fake route and you have the approval of everyone in the estate, and, you know, even then you're still gonna have people who are like, I don't know, this feels icky.
Yeah, you're always going to get that. But I mean, obviously, we've not heard Bruce Lee's dialogue in Game of Death.
True.
And I've heard some AI Bruce Lee that if I didn't know, I'd be convinced. I literally would be convinced.
And that's tricky too, because I remember I was actually dabbling with that at one point. And it's funny too, because with AI, if you try to put in someone else's voice to kind of create new dialogue, it automatically like converts the person's accent to an American accent. So it was the weirdest thing. Like, I heard Bruce's voice, but with an American accent. I'm like, this is weird. I don't like this. So you would actually still need someone to like manually replicate his inflections with the AI voice. So once again, you're still doing like half manual, half AI. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I get where people are coming from and I get the motivation for it, but it's one of those things where it's like, it's a tightrope walk. It's a ethical tightrope walk, in my opinion. But that's once again, as a creative type, I have other, you know, fellow creatives who are like, no. So,
you know, you get other people that are right on board saying, well, it can be an immersive, you know, it can draw you in a little bit more. Who knows? But I mean, what's it going to be like in a few years? You know, I mean, it's already pretty bloody good now, you know.
And I mean, I think the other thing is, Where the gray area is a little less gray is when like an actor signs off on it before they pass away. Like I know James Earl Jones said like, oh yeah, no, use my voice for this, that, and the other after I pass,
Great
knowing
voice.
that, whatever, the fee would be to use his voice, properly would go to his estate, would go to his family. And something like that's admirable. It's like, hey, I'm not around to make money anymore to support those closest to me, but, AI can still do that. So that's a little different. I feel like that's still helping somebody when all said and done. So I think when it comes to AI, it's definitely not like a black or white. It's definitely not like, oh yeah, no, this is fine, this isn't. It's a laundry list of like, this is okay, this isn't. Maybe if you do this, but not that. So I don't know. I mean, going back to the very beginning of our chat, me talking about wanting to revisit Game of Death Integral, it's like one of those things where it's like, all right, I'd probably still keep just things the way they were, and then using some manipulation to like change this thing, but change that thing, but more manual than AI. And it's like I said, it's definitely a tightrope walk.
It is interesting though. I mean, it's so people got so many different opinions. Some people can't stand it. I hear it a lot.
Yeah.
Other people are right on board with it.
Oh yeah.
I kind of like it if it's done right.
Yes.
But it's subjective, I guess.
Yeah.
But talking of that, obviously we're working on Arrow, Fist of Fury, Big Boss looked incredible. Way of the Dragon looked fantastic, but they didn't use the original negatives. I think they used film elements for it.
Yes. So
what do you reckon happened to that? Do you reckon, I've heard rumors that Bruce might have got rid of it himself. I've heard this, because someone said to him, don't show that film.
Well, I knew once again that was another one that he was making, especially for the Hong Kong audiences. But I doubt he would have gone as far as to wreck the negatives.
Damage it, yeah.
No, well, it was funny because Big Boss and Fist of Fury, luckily they were indeed original camera negative.
Yeah, that's
because right. the Big Boss was the negatives conformed to that final 1983-ish Cantonese re-release. So that's why it all lines up with that. Yeah, Way of the Dragon, I can't remember. I think I was told interpositive. Although it's...
I think it was film elements, definitely, yeah.
It was definitely film elements, but it felt more like an inner negative than an inner positive. But it was still like, it's all film from start to finish. So it's still possible that the negatives could be found for that at some point. Game of Death, funny enough, though, even though that was the newest of the films, 78, 79, that was another one that was an inner positive. And I don't know, this is once again just a theory, like a way out there theory. I don't know, since it was actually involving Columbia Pictures at the time, since people forget, the finished film was essentially an American co-production. Yeah. If somehow Columbia Pictures ended up with the negatives at one point, and it just somehow stayed there, and Sony could suddenly be sitting on the OCN for the 78 Game of Death and not realize it. I doubt that's the case. It's definitely a long shot, but it's really weird that the OCN's not found for that one either, even though it's the newest film. And that's why, of course, Enter the Dragon, being a Warner Brothers, was safely OCN.
Yeah, of course.
So, 3 out of 5 ain't bad, I guess.
Oh, it is good. Obviously, with Way of the Dragon, there's a few focus issues throughout the film. You would have seen them. There is.
So that's already in.
How would you feel about AI maybe sharpening it up and making a redux? Do you think it could be done?
So the tricky thing with that, and I've seen this in photos and video, is sometimes when AI is trying to bring focus to something, it's not doing it correctly. So, for example, I've seen things where with the depth of field, you want the focus to be specifically on one specific plane, like where characters are or an object is. But then with AI, it's trying to focus everything, even if that wasn't the original intent. So with that, you would actually have to, we would have to get to a point with AI where we can actually tell it exactly what we want in focus where. And funny enough, we're actually at that point with like actual photography where there is sort of this way where it can actually replicate changing the focus in post-production. Like it does a deep focus, but then changes everything later on. I haven't really messed with it myself. I forgot what camera does that.
That is clever, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like I feel like with that, because it's mainly the airport scenes in Way of the Dragon, because they're just like
guerrilla style, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, when you're shooting on film, you literally need to measure your shot.
Yeah.
So that's why they were like kind of winging it. Even like going back to the Big Boss, the opening shot of the film, they're shooting way on the other side of the pier and they're zooming in. And, Bruce and Tu Cha Cheng, the uncle, look a little
out of focus.
because I think what they did was when you're focusing on a lens, you have it go like this number of feet, this number of meters, and then it's eventually infinity. Like after you go, I think like 30 feet, depending on the lens, it's just infinity. So I think they might just like focused all the way, but then you'll notice that like the background's a little more in focus than they are. Like not terribly so, but obviously they couldn't take a ruler or measuring tape all the way across the water to get the shot right. So they just made do. But with the way the dragon, like you said, was much more guerrilla style. Because all the people in the background, they're not extras, they're just people who are actually just at the airport. Say for maybe some of the people in that first scene or the first part of the scene where Bruce is being stared at, like, hey, do you want to be in a movie? Yeah, sure. So that's probably what happened there.
Probably,
yeah. But I don't know. I feel like with AI sharpening, it's you kind of get into that territory where it's tricky because like, yeah, the intent might have been there, but that wasn't the end result. You kind of go into like the George Lucas territory again, and then you start to annoy people with that. So it's like, so like,
but you'd still have the original anyway. From my perspective,
yes.
Let's have a look. I mean, if it's done correctly and it looks better, you've still got the other one for the purists.
Exactly. Keep the option, and then you're safer. Once again, not like George Lucas, where it's like, no, you only get the new one.
You're only going to see this.
You're going to like it. That's basically how it is with Star Wars at this point.
Because there's a scene in Way of the Dragon that I did it myself recently. It's where Bruce and Nora Mao are going to one of the fountains, and the camera work is really shaky.
Yeah.
Really shaky. And I put it in Premiere, and I used warp stabilizer. And you know what? It actually worked pretty well. Yeah. I mean, literally everyone was moving in the background. The only thing, there was a little bit of something with a fountain. But for my eyes, I'd prefer to watch it that way, to be honest. Even though I am a bit of a purist, I like them as is.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it would be nice to have an option. That's all. That's just my opinion.
Options are fine. I think that's the safest bet with things like that.
Yeah, so you've still got the original anyway. So, right, so working with Arrow, obviously they had access to sound effects from Golden Harvest and music. Is there a list of music used in the film? Obviously, we've covered it a little bit, because I'm trying to gather the music for all the Bruce Lee movies, especially the documentary, Bruce Lee, the Legend.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I know the Arrow version of The Final Game of Death, their cut, used the opening to Bruce Lee, the Legend, without the wax and all the sound effects that was in it. So would there be a sheet of music that was used in that documentary?
So I can't remember if we actually got a music listing for that one, but what happened was, this was one of those instances where we actually had a music and effects track. So a lot of times Forza Star will send over films where we have the M&E track, sometimes separately. And with Bruce Lee the Legend, that was one where we got lucky, where we literally had just the music.
Wow.
And the funny thing is, what's unfortunate is some of it you can tell wasn't really stored well. Not because like you can hear pops or cracks, but sometimes it sounds almost like when you had a cassette tape and it got a little crumpled and then you had to try to play it again. That's how some of it sounds. Yeah. So, but it's pretty cool though. I've actually been thinking about trying to isolate each individual track, like, the Game of Death outtakes, the End of the Dragon cover, the opening, the end credits. Because the funny thing is, of course, at the end of the film, it says music by Avalon Music or something like that, which seems sort of like a very vague like name for someone who might have been, a composer at Golden Harvest. Because I've had my theories over the years as to who might have been doing some of that music, who might have done the Big Boss Cantonese music, aside from Pink Floyd, obviously. I theorized on the last commentary that it might have been Frankie Chan. But there's another composer whose name I'm blanking on at the moment that it also could have been, because I still cannot find evidence as to who might have composed some of the library tracks that would be used in other Golden Harvest films too. Because, for example, like the music that's used in James Tien's final fight scene, Bruce's first fight scene, and of course the final fight as well, you also hear during the parachute sequence in Eastern Condors.
Right. Yeah.
So that's one of those tricky things. So I think Avalon Music might have just been like a vague name that they came up with for one of the Golden Harvest composers. But yeah, no. So the music track still exists. It's just shockingly more original music than you would think for the documentary.
Really?
So, unlike Bruce Lee, the Man in the Legend, which blatantly used "One of These Days" by Pink Floyd.
They did. Yeah.
So,
I mean, they obviously like Pink Floyd music.
Yes. Yes.
One of the Hong Kong cuts of I think it was a Hong Kong cut or something like that. I mean, they used several Pink Floyd songs.
Yeah, Big Boss used Time multiple times. There was, I think it was Saucer Full of Secrets, or was that the album? I forgot the name. But yeah, there were a few in there, and then of course a little bit of King Crimson as well.
That's right.
So, yeah. But yeah, no, that was always interesting too. But yeah, Pink Floyd has popped up in quite a few of like the 70s era martial arts films. But yeah, like I said, Bruce Lee, the Man, the Legend, used as well, and in the trailer. So.
But I would I'd love to get a list of the songs, because if you go on YouTube, you can type in Bruce Lee, the Legend soundtrack.
Yeah.
Basically, I don't know how they've done it, but it's all there, but it's all pieced in together, and some of the quality drops out. It's quite bad. Yeah. But it would be lovely to have this, you know, and know what it is, even if it's just for documenting it. Or like I said, I've done The Way of the Dragon. I've done Fist of Fury. I'm now trying to do The Big Boss, as you sent to me in the heat of the night. Damaging, is it Damaging? I think that's how it's pronounced. But this is going to be a minefield, you know. I think it's going to take more than just me to do this, because it's
the Mandarin version's very tricky. Like I did as much research as I could before I did the new commentary. But yeah, Daimajin, that had a few tracks used in it. Namely, I think when Bruce was running back to the house after the factory fight, and the portion after that as well. So yeah, no, there were a few like Japanese tracks, American tracks, a few bits from the late great Quincy Jones, including In the Heat of the Night. And there was another film I'm blanking on the name of. Like, people think like, oh, you're so knowledgeable. That's like, no, I take notes down and I read them later on, because I can't always remember all these things. And I look back,
can't.
And
I know
it was that thing that I completely forgot about. When you have ADHD brain, trying to remember all the stuff can be a bit of a chore at times.
Tell me about it. Right, another question. Fred Weintraub was sent the Big Boss and Fist of Fury reels from Hong Kong back in '72 from Golden Harvest and Bruce. Does anyone know what happened to those reels?
That's one I've thought about as well. Like, I would think that, maybe Weintraub brought him back when he went to visit Bruce directly on the Game of Death set. So who knows? Like, that's one of those things where it's like, that could have been either or. Because I remember people were like bugging the Weintraub family, like, "Hey, you also have them reels?" And I don't think that actually like came up with anything when all was said and done. So I don't know. Like that's definitely more of a mystery that sadly I don't have an answer for. But like I jokingly said, he might just brought him back with him when he went to see Bruce at the Game of Death set.
Yeah, I suppose. Right, in the future, if Brandon takes up the collection of films with Bruce Lee again, what material would he like to discover or like to be discovered? I mean, obviously, the full Big Boss would be a great start.
Yeah, like we're getting to that point now where we're getting less and less. It's kind of crazy.
Of course.
Like we're gonna have to like expand out of the films themselves. Like I know the big one. I still need to watch your video. Was Blondie, because like obviously that's one where I'm like people have barely found any episodes of it. Like I think you can count on one hand of what's been found. I think
3 episodes, but there has been some film reels found in America somewhere. The Bruce Lee episode isn't in there. Yeah, there's a guy who I've been in correspondence with, John Overall, that he's done really extensive work on Blondie.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I mean, really extensive work.
That's the thing. Like that's probably something that wouldn't fit into the set, but it's, I don't know. I mean, like you said, the complete Big Boss. If we could find the Fist of Fury teaser, Way of the Dragon, I've heard rumors of behind the scenes footage, but I don't know if there's any like concrete evidence. If this is a big if, nothing's been confirmed whatsoever. In the event that Criterion loses the U.S. rights, I'd be very curious to see Arrow do a U.S. release of their set. And then maybe by that point, Warner Brothers would be like, "Hey, we've had our 4K of Enter the Dragon out long enough. We'll let you have it now."
I would love James Flower and you guys to get your hands on it. Because the seamless branching, I mean, obviously on the 4K, it's got the theatrical cut and the special edition. Yeah. I mean, you're using up disk space. If the seamless branching was on there, job done, and you're going to get a better transfer. I'm not a tech, but in my humble opinion. And some of the extras, a new making of. and send someone down to see if the Henry Wong footage is available. We've got that Anna Capri footage. Buy it. Buy it, Warner Brothers. Put it on there.
So we're not seeing like that 5th generation VHS copy anymore.
Yeah, wouldn't we like to have exactly what she had? And obviously now, I don't know if you've seen the stuff about Bamboo and Dragons that may be coming out. Some John Saxon footage from Enter the Dragon.
I did not see that.
You find it on YouTube. There's little bits. You see Bob Wall grabbing hold of Bruce's foot and him sort of turn. And I'm like, whoa, I've never seen that before. Never seen that before. And that's in the making. I think that's a Dave Tadman thing. He's in with Steve Kerridge. They're putting something together.
Gotcha.
John Saxon had a video camera on Enter the Dragon. Who knew?
Well,
his son found it, apparently.
It's funny that you mentioned that. One other thing I would like to see, speaking of like early video footage, is like a proper transfer of the Game of Death behind the scenes footage when they were shooting the publicity photos with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and James Tan. Yes, because I have that like low quality copy where like they shot it off of like another TV or something. Like it's something, but it's like watching the Bigfoot footage. So
yeah,
I would love to see that in like the proper quality, but it's so funny. Like not even with just Bruce Lee footage, but like some documentaries that we've tried to get onto certain releases of films where it's like, oh, we want this much money. It's like that costs more than licensing the film and restoring this film.
Yeah,
like, come on, be realistic. You're sitting on stuff that's literally deteriorating. Like you're gambling at this point.
So, I heard that footage, that Game of Death footage. I don't know how true this is. Apparently, it was Bruce Lee's brother Robert, and playing it on a monitor, the footage, and someone was filming it off of that monitor. And when he saw it, he got quite cross. So it could be out there somewhere. Whether Dan and Santo sat on it, who knows who sat on it? Yeah. You just don't know.
Yeah. And that's like very early video camera footage because like the video cameras weren't really a thing at the time. Like for someone to actually own something like that, in the early 70s, with like the backyard footage, for example, that was quite a big deal back then. So
yeah, not many.
No.
Not like many,
footage was, like 8mm, 16mm, like the Enter the Dragon, documentary footage. Actually, I'm not sure if that was 16 or 35 that was shot on. And it's still really good quality we've seen. So no lower than 16mm at the very least. But yeah, I don't know. It's unfortunate how often people sit on things expecting like this giant payout and then either it gets lost, gets damaged, deteriorates. It's these different, formats, video, film, it's all finite. Like it's going to last for a while, but not forever. That's why so many films that you think like, oh, these are being preserved very well. Like how often movies seem to be restored, then re-restored, then restored once again. Like when you watch, like one of the best restoration documentaries I've seen was for Jaws, the original Jaws. And you would think, oh, the movie that invented the summer blockbuster, like, oh, it must be preserved well. And like, yeah, it is like the best possible that you can for a film archive, but there's still, print damage, print deterioration of the original camera negative. And then once they finish the restoration, what's funny is they preserve it on multiple formats. They preserve it digitally on a hard drive. They preserve it on a new interpositive. So that way, it's not the original camera negative, but God forbid something would happen to that original camera negative. They have a really strong interpositive.
Yeah.
And it's so funny too, because I'm sure my dad's watching this too. Hey, Dad.
Hello.
There's a line from a Three Stooges short where it was Dutiful but Dumb. And they're playing photographers. And so Moe's asking Curly, about like how the process turning out with photos. And then Curly says, I'm pretty positive about the negative, but I'm a little negative about the positive. It's a play on words, but funny enough, that's how film restoration sounds. Like, all right, what have we found? It's like, well, the good news is we found the negative, but some of the interpositives are not, great for follow-ups or for like some of the tech shots we need. So I'm pretty positive about the negative, but I'm not too negative. I'm a little more negative about the positive. That just sounds like film restoration to me.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it works.
That's great. Talking of Jaws, actually, I've got the 4K. It looks amazing. Have you seen the 4K of Jaws?
Yeah, I actually saw it in theaters too.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, if a Spielberg film doesn't look good in 4K, we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, great. Right, I've got another question for you. Have you ever seen the episode Tagged for Murder, Ironside, with Bruce Lee in it? And does he know if there's any footage from behind the scenes of that?
I've seen parts of it, including Bruce with Jean LaBelle.
In LaBelle, yeah.
But not really aware of like behind the scenes footage of that. I feel like 60s era TV shows on back, you're not really going to find much of that. Maybe photos, but even then, it's more for like the more popular shows, like Star Trek or something like that. Or going into the 50s with like I Love Lucy, stuff like that. But like actual behind the scenes, that was the tricky thing, because I feel like unless someone was making like a full documentary about something back then, film, I don't want to say film being relatively new, because film was already a thing going into the 1900s, but actual behind the scenes footage for a TV show, there could be, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
Yeah, so I feel the same way, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I do feel the same way.
Good question.
Same. Yeah. Well, have you ever seen The Orphan, 1960?
I have not, actually.
You've not seen it?
It's interesting because there's been a lot of hubbub, weirdly enough, over seeing it in color or black and white.
Right.
Because apparently there's more elements available for a black and white version than the original color version. So it gets really weird, because a lot of people forget that like a lot of the 50s era Hong Kong films were in black and white. Like they weren't really doubling down on color more until the 60s. So for something like literally on the cusp of that, you can kind of get why, like, okay, well, we shot it in color just in case. Probably had a few plays in color, but then most of it was probably in black and white just because it was cheaper to replicate. But I haven't seen either incarnation. That's one that's kind of eluded me. Like when it comes to the childhood era films, and even though he was technically more of an adult at that point, I do need more experience with that. Like that's my one Bruce Lee area where it's like, I'm not gonna say I'm like completely oblivious to, but it's one I have not like done
really delved into.
Yeah, which I should. I've done so much with like the main Bruce Lee films, Boss through Game of Death, for so long. It's like I should probably go back a little further to his older.
Do you have any reason why it's never been unearthed or released generally? I've heard different rumors.
I mean, it is one of those things where it's like, once again, at least with the color version, you have people sitting on stuff that they know is rare, that they're just going to want more money. And so I think that's already been tricky. But even so, like finding proper film elements for even, the black and white films or the black and white version of The Orphan.
Yeah.
And also, I think rights start to get a little murky. Like who actually owns this? And like, do we need more? Like, you probably shouldn't need more of a say from the Bruce Lee estate at that point, but like who would actually own the rights to these older films? Because, when you get into the 60s, Shaw Brothers were typically the name you would see a lot. And then the 70s, the Shaw Brothers, Golden Harvest, Seasonal. But yeah, that's what's, funny with things like the, what's that called? I don't want to get the name wrong. The Game of Clones, the Severin set, the Bruceploitation set, like trying to make sure, like, even though these films feel like public domain, they're not technically. So like trying to make sure you like clear the rights where possible. In some cases, you just can't find anything. So it's like you just put them out there and they've just completely I don't want to say disintegrated, but the rights are just kind of up.
I mean, I'm not a big fan myself, but I have got that box set. One of my subscribers sent it to me. What are your thoughts on Bruceploitation movies?
Oh, it's a very interesting subgenre, basically, because
agreed.
Like, I've talked about, well, funny enough, like I have like a mini commentary within Clones of Bruce Lee on there. I was one of the many who did like the almost like the relay race commentary where it's like, all right, I'm done, your turn. So we all just filmed our own things and then we just edited them together. But I grew up with some of those as well. Like when I realized even as a kid that there are only so many real Bruce Lee movies, like, hey, let me check out some of the the fake ones. And as a kid, I watched a lot of the Ho Chung Tao Bruce Lee films. Like that was my go-to. So I actually joked with Frank Jang when I said that the Game of Clones set was definitely more focused on Bruce Lee, Huang Ken Lung, and Dragon Lee than it was Bruce Lee, even though there was a little bit of Bruce Lee in there. So I was like, are we going to get more Bruce Lee if we get a second set?
Well, I'm hoping they are going to do a second set because, again, it's nice to preserve these things.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely like a part of Bruce's history. You
can't get away from it, whether we like them or not. And sometimes I quite enjoy some of them.
Yeah.
Other times I find myself woken up at the end because I fell asleep watching it.
That does happen, too. Like even... The funny thing is, I feel like the most honest of them was Ho Chung Tao, Bruce Lee, because he was like the first one to kind of get away from it towards the end. Like Chinese Stuntman was one of the last ones he did, and Chinese Stuntman is actually really good.
Yeah, that's got Dan in the Center in it, isn't it?
Yes, and John Ladowski. That one's actually really
good film.
And it's almost like he was throwing shade at the film industry with that movie. It's very, hate to use the term, but it was very meta. It was sort of a meta commentary on filmmaking at the time. So I feel like he was being more himself in that one. Another one I really enjoy is it's called The Last Strike in Hong Kong, but here in America it's better known as Soul Brothers of Kung Fu.
Right.
I think in the UK it was called Tiger Strikes Back, I think, or The Tiger Strikes Again, something like that. Because they're trying to make it sound like it was a sequel to Exit the Dragon and
Of course.
Tiger. But that was really good. I jokingly said that was Bruce Lee's big boss, basically. And the main villain was played by the late great Ku Feng, who just passed away this past week. But he was a really good villain to Ho Chung Tao in that movie. But yeah, like some of them were quite enjoyable, and some, like you said, you're like, wow, this is boring.
Yeah.
So,
you got to try and appreciate them for what they are. I mean, I did love the documentary.
Yes,
the Clones of Bruce. I thought the documentary was great, and it's sort of like I used to think they're trying to copy Bruce, not realizing they were the ones being exploited. You know,
exactly.
So I did enjoy that, and it sort of made me think, do you know what? And also, if you did get the box set, you got the Big Boss Part 2, which was filmed at Pak Chong at the Ice Factory, very similar to how it was with Bruce. So if you're into that sort of stuff, you can appreciate it.
It's like a fever dream. The Big Boss Part 2 is like a fever dream, basically. Like, it's something for years I wanted to see, knowing it was going to be bad.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to sound rude, but even by Bruceploitation standards. Because, like you said, like, it's definitely an acquired taste for Bruce Lee fans, is Bruceploitation. But it was still very surreal to see them going back to the same locations.
Yeah.
And it's so funny when you watch the opening credit sequence, I didn't realize until I saw it in HD who was actually replacing Bruce Lee and Han Ying-che. It was actually Yuen Wah and Corey Yun replicating the final fight of the Big Boss. I'm like, oh, all right. That would explain why he's doing that flip kick, because Yuen Wah just did the same thing he did when he doubled Bruce Nair the Dragon. But then, we cut to Bruce Lee suddenly replacing him in the jail playing Cheng Chao-wan. So technically we have two people playing Cheng Chao-wan in the Big Boss Part 2. You have Yuen Wah in the opening credits, and then Bruce Lee for the rest of the movie. And then Lo Lee, of all people, playing the Bruceploitation role as... I think he's been like identified as like the brother in one version, or just like a metaphorical brother, and then a cousin. I'm like, all right, which one is it anyway? Because now, like, apparently he's not avenging their father's death. He's avenging the death of the uncle from the first movie. And I'm like, what? I'm so confused.
It does get a little confusing.
It's a very murky movie, but it was still, like I said, very surreal to watch. And then seeing the manager, because we've all talked about the fact that the manager was one of the few villains in the first film who did not get his comeuppance. And then finally in the second film, we see what happened. He took over, which makes sense. And, they had their little clunky final fight at the end of the movie where he does get a very, like, karma-induced death at the end of the film, which is a nice callback to the
original Big Boss.
Exactly. So that was, like, the one part I really liked in Big Boss Part 2. Like, it took 2 movies for it to happen, but, karma finally comes for him.
Yeah.
It was more of a curiosity piece for the hardcore Big Boss fans. Is it good? No. But was it still kind of fun in a weird way to watch? Yeah, absolutely.
So would you like to see a box set Part 2? I guess we all would, really.
Yeah. I would love to see a Volume 2, definitely giving more love to Ho Chung Tao.
I'd like to see the Man and the Myth on there. Bruce Lee, the Man and the Myth.
Man and the Myth, I can't get into too much. I know there's some weird rights issues with that one, but I know that there's efforts. That's all I can really say at the moment. Right. One I still hope gets out there, and I know Michael Worth has been teasing this one through screen caps, is Fist of Fury Part 2. Because I do feel like that is a really solid, unofficial sequel. Like, compared to Big Boss Part 2, Fist of Fury 2 looks like an Oscar winner.
100%.
Like, Fist of Fury Part 2 is a solid, unofficial sequel. And in fact, New Fist of Fury, we've all said is like the official sequel, but it's official in that it's from the same director. And then it brings back some of the cast, but it's not a Golden Harvest production. Fist of Fury Part 2, even though it's just as unofficial, if not more so, than New Fist of Fury, I still feel like it's the better sequel storytelling-wise. Like, seeing Lolier playing the main villain, I think it's Miyamoto. I think that's his character's name. The final fight's great between Ho Chung Tao and Loli. It's a really solid fight scene between the two of them. And actually showed what Ho Chung Tao could do over time. Because we see Ho Chung Tao's earlier martial arts films. His screen fighting skills are a little clunky. Like especially if you watch like New Game of Death. Like he's already a little better by that point, but it's still like a little. His kicks are a little wobbly. It's like he's fine, but then by the time you get to Fist of Fury Part 2, Chinese Stuntman, Soul Brothers Kung Fu, you can tell like when he's working with certain choreographers, like Tommy Lee in Fist of Fury Part 2, the Yun Clan in both Soul Brothers Kung Fu and Dynamo. When he's working with really good choreographers, you see what he was capable of on screen. It's like, all right, that's what it is. Like, you just need good choreographers. And to be fair, there's some doubling for him in those movies too.
Of course.
Like funny enough, like you see Kufeng in the final fight of Soul Brothers of Kung Fu, and Kufeng was like a stocky, built, muscular dude, and then suddenly there's a couple bits where he's actually being doubled by Yun Bu in the final fight. Like, oh,
he's really wiry and lean.
He suddenly got a lot slimmer in that wide shot. But yeah, no, it really came down to who the directors were, who the choreographers were, and yeah, your mileage may vary with Bruceploitation. Even something like Fist of Fury 3, which was essentially, funny enough, an unofficial sequel to the unofficial sequel, because it wasn't the same production.
There we go again.
Exactly. Like it's meant to be a sequel to Fist of Fury Part 2, but loosely, so much so that when you find posters for that movie online, it doesn't say Fist of Fury Part 3. It has the convoluted title of Jeet Kune, the Claws, and the Supreme Kung Fu. All one title. Yeah. I'm like, sure, why not? And to make it even more confusing, when it was released in the US on VHS by Video Gems, they called it Fist of Fury 2. I'm like, no, it's 3. So now when you say Fist of Fury 2, sometimes it's confusing.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, if you say Fist of Fury Part 2, then it's, the Jing Wu sequel. Which, funny enough, to make it even more confusing on top of that, so Fist of Fury Part 2 played in theaters in the US as Fist of Fury Part 2, even though we got Fist of Fury, of course, as Chinese Connection. So people probably went to the theater thinking it was a sequel to The Big Boss. It's like, no. Damn it.
Well, hopefully they will do another set. I mean, I don't even know if I've actually gone through every movie on the first set yet.
It's a lot.
It's quite a lot on there, but like I said, it's nice to have them all in one. And whether people like it or not, it's always going to be tied to Bruce Lee, whether we like it or not. I don't know another artist that's actually got their own subgenre. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone.
It's funny because you have Elvis impersonators, but they didn't try to make their own music.
Exactly. So, or their own films, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I've made that comparison in the past that I feel like the closer we come to anything else like Bruceploitation are Elvis impersonators.
Right. So,
but I feel like they're weirdly enough held in a higher regard to their fan base than Bruceploitation is to Bruce Lee fans, though because of stuff like Enter the Clones of Bruce Lee and Game of Clones, people are now more aware of what went behind those movies and how a lot of the guys who worked on those films, especially the stars themselves, were like, hey, it was a job, it was a gig. When you look back on how long they actually made those movies, like Ho Chung Tao, Bruce Lee, he was basically only making them for like not even a decade.
Yeah.
Like they were at their peak in like the late 70s. And ironically enough, after Game of Death, that's when it kind of slowed down. Bruce Lee, Huang Ken Long, I feel like he probably went into it the longest. Like he was actually doing it into the 80s. And Dragon Lee kind of did the same thing, but then he kind of just started to take on more of his persona with South Korean films as, if I remember his name correctly, Kyo Rong. So like that was the other thing. Like it was different for all of them. And yeah, I don't know. I respect it in its own, once again, fever
for what it is.
Yeah, exactly. They weren't trying to replace him per se. Right. So they were just trying to sort of keep the spirit alive in their own quirky way, I guess. So that's why, as I get older, I find more enjoyment out of them, even though I was watching them as a kid. So
when Fury of the Dragon came out, I see it in the video shop. Fury of the Dragon, was just chopped up Green Hornet.
Yeah.
So the cover had Bruce flexing his lats from Way of the Dragon. I bought it. I was there. I was one of them. But I used to watch him back in the day, and I've got a soft spot for the Man, the Myth, the Chinese Stuntman as well. There's a couple that I actually quite enjoy for what they are. Yeah. Do they compare to Bruce Lee movies? No. Although Quentin Tarantino might argue with us on that one, but that's another thing altogether. We won't go down that rabbit hole today. Maybe on another video, mate. But so can you tell people what you're working on at the moment, or is it a little bit shh at the moment?
Let's see. So I'll tread carefully in the event any of the companies are listening to me. So So I briefly mentioned Golden Princess earlier, which of course was the company renowned for the John Woo films, Ringo Lam films, a lot of Italian fat stuff. That's been like partly announced because the big announcement was made like right at the beginning of the new year that Shout Factory got the rights to their library, which was a very like a widespread licensing. So it's very different from how a lot of the Blu-ray companies would just license out a film or like a small bulk of films. This is like a big swath. I can't go into all the details, but it's definitely a big deal. Two of the films have been announced for a digital release so far, so I can mention those. That's City on Fire and Hard Boiled.
Right.
So they're both on Fandango at home and iTunes on Apple TV.
Okay.
So those two I can mention. They look amazing. Hard Boiled, funny enough,
I haven't seen Hard Boiled for years, actually.
Yeah, well, it's going to look even better than you last saw it.
Well, definitely. That was probably on video, probably.
Oh, there you go. Well, it's funny because like Hard Boiled has had decent Blu-ray releases. Like there was the US Blu-ray, not so much. The US Blu-ray just looked like a DVD. The Hong Kong Blu-ray wasn't too shabby. It was definitely like the best at the time. What I've seen of the restored Hard Boiled that Shout has worked on, it's going to blow everything else out of the water. And I know I'm biased, since I'm helping with them, with the audio tracks.
Yeah.
But no. But City on Fire, on the other hand, City on Fire was one of those films that unfortunately was kind of stuck in like upscale hell, in that like every release on Blu-ray wherever was just taken from like standard definition source. That was during that time period where it seemed like every Hong Kong Blu-ray of a Fortune Star film just looked like they blew up a DVD, and City on Fire was one of the films that looked like that as well. So this is a brand new restoration, 4K restoration, and it's easily the best the film has ever looked. I'm going to be saying that a lot, but because it's true. So
that's cool. That's good.
So I've been working on audio tracks for those. We're trying to make sure we get the best quality, both video and audio. Trying to see what I can find for any additional extras right now. Nothing that can be announced at the moment. But let's see what else. So Idiot Films, they've announced a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of Jackie Chan 4Ks coming out from them that they've announced. I think Operation Condor was the last one they announced. What else? So doing a little bit for Eureka at the moment too. I've been working on the audio tracks for Hong Kong 1941.
Nice.
Which, ironically enough, I was watching that. I didn't even know Kufeng was in it. I was like, oh, wow, he's still alive, apparently. And then, like, just a few days later, it said that he passed away. I'm like, hope I didn't jinx that. But the guy was like 94. So I like to think he lived a pretty good life. So, but it was so pretty cool. Like, he was in like over 300 films, I think. And I would have loved to have seen him in like a real Bruce Lee movie too. Like he did a lot of great stuff with Shaw Brothers. So I think like the Golden Harvest Shaw Brothers rivalry would have kind of prevented that. But maybe by the 80s, who knows? What else? Nothing Bruce Lee related at the moment, sadly. But it seems like that comes in ways of like every 3 to 4 years I end up on a Bruce Lee project somehow.
And maybe for 2030 for Bruce Lee's 90th, possibly. Who knows?
Maybe. Yeah,
who knows?
Like I said, I'm hoping that either Criterion, if they still have the rights, they'll do a 4K set, or if they lose the rights, Arrow can swoop in and do a US release. Because Arrow, funny enough, they've done releases in the past where, because even though they're a UK-based company, they do US and UK releases.
That's right, yeah, I know.
And there have been some films, I think it was True Romance, that initially they only had the UK rights, so they did a UK release, and then months, if not a year later, they got the US rights and then released that later on. And then recently they did the opposite with Witness with Harrison Ford, where they did a US release because they didn't have the UK rights. And then eventually they got the UK rights, even though, once again, they're a UK company, they could only get the US rights. So then eventually they did the UK release. So they could do a US Bruce Lee set, but once again, that is by no means even close to being a confirmation. That's more just me as a fan.
Yeah,
I just want to see them somehow finally get a 4K release here in the US. So we got Enter the Dragon, but that's because it's Warner Brothers. So Criterion, as far as I know, still has US rights. Like, until my way of measuring it is, I told somebody else this, that they got the rights to the first 2 Police Story films first, and because those came out in like spring of 2019, and then the Bruce Lee set came out summer of 2020, I believe. And as far as I know, they still have the Police Story film. So I feel like until those rights elapse, they'll probably still have the Bruce Lee ones too. So.
Yeah. Well, I know they've got the rights to the Bruce Lee films at the moment over here. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
So
we're putting an event on. I don't know if you know about Brucelee. Steve Kerridge is making a documentary.
okay.
Brucelee, the man, the legend, the icon, and we've been in touch with James Flower about getting a DCP file to play maybe the Mandarin print of the Big Boss.
That'd be great.
Ah, on a big screen, you know.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So
And that's the sad thing here is because like while we can have theatrical plays here through Janus Films, because Janus Films is sort of like I don't know if they're like the partner company. I'm still kind of murky on how they're related with Criterion, but usually you can't really have one without the other.
Right.
I feel like I'm about to start the Love and Marriage from Frank Sinatra. Can't have one without the other. But the thing is, like, I was lucky enough to finally see the Big Boss on the big screen back in 2023 because of Janus Film still having the rights.
Yeah.
But the problem is, as far as I know, Criterion doesn't have the rights to the Mandarin cut. So the thing is, since Arrow funded the scan of that, the raw scan of the Mandarin version, let alone the reconstruction using the 4K restoration,
so they've got the rights. Yes, isn't it?
Arrow would have the rights to that. So I feel like Criterion and Arrow would actually have to work together here in the US to get the Mandarin cut out. I could be wrong. There, legal red tape, technicalities is always headache inducing. Like I always know like the rudimentary elements, like you can do this, you can't do that. Someone's like, oh, well, why doesn't Criterion just release this? It's like, well, because Arrow did that. Or, like, for example, something as simple as when 88 Films did the Project A 4Ks in the US, people were like, oh, why aren't they going to put it on 4K in the UK? It's like, well, they don't have the UK rights. Eureka has the UK rights.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, why doesn't Eureka put it out on 4K? It's like, well, they don't own a 4K restoration because 88 Films paid for the 4K restoration. Fortune Star owns the rights to the film. Fortune Star owns a 2K restoration that they can give to wherever they license the film. But Eureka could only use the 4K restoration if they still have the license from Fortune Star, but also they would have to pay for the restoration from 88 Films.
It is headache inducing from a consumer's point of view that just want these things out there.
Oh, and I get it too. Believe me.
Totally, yeah.
Like I would love for everyone to have everything everywhere in their best possible quality. That was like the dream of every film nerd.
Oh, 100%.
And I have the foot in both doors too, as someone who actually gets to work on these, but also as a fan. There are times where I get frustrated where it's like, I really want this thing, but for some reason we can't. And sometimes I understand why, and other times I'm like, I don't understand why.
Yeah.
Like, for example, this one Shaw Brothers film, and anybody watching this who knows me knows where I'm going with this. There's a Shaw Brothers film called Hong Kong Godfather from 1984, starring Beardy Leung Kar-yan. It's a great, basically like a heroic bloodshed film, but more with machetes than guns. The finale is insane. The finale is almost like the House of Blue Leaves fight in Kill Bill.
Oh, really?
It's very graphic. The weirdest thing is Celestial restored the film, never gave it a physical release in Hong Kong, got one US DVD from Funimation, a company known for anime, and that was it. For like the last 15 years, there's been no other release of this movie. And I have bugged the hell out of every company I work with.
Keep on making them waves. Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, I don't know if Celestial's just not licensing it out for some reason. And it's like, I can never get a straight answer anywhere. So for all I know, I could suddenly be surprised one day and like Vinegar Syndrome could come out of left field and like, hey, we're doing a 4K of Hong Kong Godfather. So who knows? Like, it's one of those things where like, that's where I'm just kind of regressing back to just being a fan rather than being an insider working with these companies.
Of course,
it's like there are times where I can have sway, and then there are other times where it's just deaf ears. Which I get it. There's always things where it's like, is this thing going to sell? Is there going to be enough push for this thing? I do feel like with something like Hong Kong Godfather, since there is like a cult following for that movie,
there's a market for it.
Yeah, exactly. But at the end of the day, it's just one of those things where it's like I have to just wait as a fan. So.
Well, this has been fantastic, mate. Thank you so much for the awesome audio commentaries that you've done. The one you've done on Game of Death with
Mike Leader.
You had me in hysterics, the pair of you. You sound like you was having a really good time with that one. I did enjoy that.
Mike's always great to do commentaries with. It's so funny too because we're always like 12 to 13 hours apart. We're trying to get the timing just right for the two of us. Like I'm just funny enough, I record all my commentaries here in my home office. I actually had a vocal booth from my last job, and so they let me keep it. And so I would literally just have like a little monitor in there, and then
Perfect.
I would just have the movie in there, and then I would just be on my headphones, and then we'll just talk back and forth. And what's great is that it's synced up, so like the microphone is already connected, so he can hear me with the same mic I'm using to record. And so he and I just watch the film, we time it just right at the beginning, and then we just go through it, because that's usually whenever I've done a commentary with him, I have like the vaguest of notes just to hit just in case. But he and I usually just bounce off each other and like remind each other kind of by accident. I was like, oh, hey, like I forgot to bring this thing up. Let's talk
when
about
I done
that.
a review of Game of Death, I did say I really did enjoy the audio commentary, and people should sit back and listen. You just feel like you just sat with a couple of mates having a bit of a laugh.
Especially with the late tall tale telling Bob Wall. So, the fact that they had to put that warning before his interview on the Arrow disc, I'm like, oh my god.
I know. Right, well, this has been fantastic. Have you got, where can people follow you? Obviously, is it AllThingsFilmWithYamYam on Twitter?
Yes. So I'm on, I still call it Twitter.
So do I.
So I'm on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky, although I can't remember if it still comes up as Old Pangyao on there. Instagram I don't really use as much as I should. I don't think I've posted anything on there in like years, but I still get followers that like find me on there. Okay. So those are kind of like the general area. Sometimes I'll look around the Blu-ray.com forums as well, depending on how some days can be a little spicier in those forums than others in regards to like people having hot takes on projects. So it's like, oh, they should have done this thing, and I'm just sitting in the corner like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna leave for today. But yeah, if you can find old Pangyao anywhere, that's me with my little. A lot of people don't know where I get my avatar from. My avatar is actually
Actually, before we sign off, I'd love to know myself.
It's actually from the, if I remember correctly, the TurboGrafx 16 version of Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so it's funny because I have two different versions. I have one where he's just jumping, and then on Twitter it's the flying sidekick. So technically, it's just like a little pixel art Jackie Chan doing a flying sidekick.
Oh wow!
But yeah, funny enough, there's another show I watch on YouTube called Game Sack, and they're making comparisons of various games. And the one they posted this past weekend, they were comparing the Nintendo and TurboGrafx 16 versions of Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu. It's like, oh, hey, look, there's my avatar. So there you go. A little trivia for the day.
Well, this has been amazing. Yeah. If you do manage to get to the UK, obviously you probably won't. You're a busy man. There is an event going on in September. You've got an invite, obviously. But this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. Likewise. I really do enjoy your work. The video essays and the audio commentaries have been great fun. So thank you so much for giving me this time. I'm looking forward to seeing the comments on the video. I think people are going to enjoy this. I really do.
Glad to hear it. And yeah, if I somehow find the time to do Game of Death Integral 2.0, I will
let me know. We'll come back and have another chat all about it. And if I find any more tracks from the Big Boss, I'll email them to you so we can maybe get a few minds on it. I've already got Steve Kerridge on it. Maybe get a few people together and maybe be able to do it together.
Yeah.
Who knows? But this has been amazing, Brandon. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you today.
Likewise.
I appreciate it. Cheers, mate.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Cheers.